My name is Baiba Mūrniece. I'm together here with some other legendary persons, ICOMOS Latvia founders. I'm also one of the founders. And when I don't think of ICOMOS Latvia and culture, heritage, and monuments, I work at the Ministry of Culture and Culture Policy Department, and we think of cultural heritage on a wider perspective, and we think also of creative industries and everything that is related to making and shaping culture policy. Thanks to ICOMOS Latvia, thanks for receiving us by the municipality of Kuldīga. We are enjoying being here tremendously. And now to Venice Charter. It's a most iconic and also most discussed and also documented, doubted by the authors. And every 10 years, the authors, the implementers are asking themselves the question, should they rewrite the charter or add something to it? In 1964, when the charter was created, we've heard that in the morning, that was the high time of post-war reconstruction time. There was a wish to develop economy, the urbanization took place, the interest in cultural identity was renewed, the interest of tourism was driving processes. But what's happening nowadays? More influence and more challenges are present. I just noted the influence of climate change, need to adapt to it, danger posed by eventual military activities, digitalization, commercial pressure, and the role of society has changed. There's a better understanding of immaterial heritage. Also, some craftsmanship skills have been lost and are being lost. And let's discuss these topics with our panelists. I want to introduce you to them. Roberts Grīnbergs, President of Latvia Castles, Latvian Architecture Chief Editor. Next, Gundars Uķis, Design Center ICOMOS Chairman, and CESIS Municipality Director Ināra Bula, and Jana Jakobsāne, UNESCO mover in Kuldīga. Let's start, each of you, to introduce with yourself and tell us what are you going to take with you from this discussion, from this meeting. As a chairman, what are your takeaways? Thank you. I think my notes are full with different ideas, and there's going to be many information I want to include in my to-do list, to share with my students. But the main finding is that we should see things in full. Also, when we read documents, we should see them in full, in the context. And without that, solutions cannot be useful for specific site, object. So the context is the king. It's important. And this also drives the steps, what we are going. It's not like phrases we should be using. So, as to me, I can subscribe to this point of view. It's important as Bible already mentioned, also our perception has changed, namely as far as material, tangible, intangible heritage goes. They are tied up, they are joined, and we should take that into account. And when we see in a wider context to restoring like a site or a town center, and we should really think, why are we restoring, why are we preserving specific object, and then we should take the human into consideration. I also subscribe to what was said, put forward by my colleagues. We have to see things in the context, and our specific is material, heritage, architecture, which should be taken into account, and at the same time also like balancing it with taking into account socio-economic considerations, in consideration with finances, technical possibilities. So these things should be seen in a wider focus. Other than that, we can come to Jūrmalas situation without being flexible enough. We can lose in long term a large part of our historical heritage. So Venice Charter has its 60th anniversary, but there is also Faro Charter and Nara document. There was a cultural heritage community, and my question, I understand Kuldīga is also this heritage community. They live in this protected environment. Some things are allowed, some things are not allowed. And people who live outside this area, they are rather free in what they can do. So the question is how these two communities can jointly work towards. So let's say someone lives outside this cultural heritage community. So the question is if that people outside would be interested to be the part of this cultural heritage community. So this is a question about how to enliven this community. Now, as to me, I wanted to say that all of us here is that we think that cultural heritage is valuable and should be kept. At the same time, we have different takes on this. We also see in some of the presentations there are also different opinions were put forward about the same thing. So I think this is why discussions are important, and it proves again and again that such events such as we have today, they are important, they're topical. The next question I have to Jānis Lēnieks, but also other people, maybe you also want to contribute. And so we here are representatives of rather exclusive community. We have rather strict opinion of Venice Charter, but at the same time, it was also mentioned that cultural heritage policy should be targeted to people and their needs. In your opinion, is Venice Charter is only for experts or for everyone? I think that everyone, 98%, do not know what it is all about, but cultural heritage, they know what it is. So the question is, how can we step outside policy? Sometimes, for example, in Lucavsala, there are monuments that's between Sweden and Russians. And if Swedish tourists come, they would go to Lucavsala. You can tell that those were your soldiers. They beat Russians, and Russians built this monument. And so there's a whole history with a monument. And if we just remove these monuments, then we lose something of our history. We lose these bridges to nowadays. So these bridges are being removed. It's easy to remove monuments. So this politicization of monuments is one thing I wanted to draw attention to. So maybe someone else wanted to contribute, share other opinion or supportive opinion. Please don't be shy. Okay, if not, then let's go on. Oh, okay, there's some courageous person. I wanted to say, not as to Venice Charter, but also about Venice Charter, about authentic, historical, and beauty and harmonic. Everyone understands it. I think a minority do not understand about it. We enjoyed that in Jūrmala. We have this Jūrmala award, and people vote for this and that object, what they like. And so what I can say is that even not restored buildings are being voted for. So at intuitive level, people understand a lot. And I think this is an important thing. Yeah, I want to continue with Jūrmala. New European Bauhaus is very popular. It's sustainable, inclusive. This is one thing. And at the same time, there's also other part that the cultural heritage owners of these buildings should adjust to climate change, to accessibility. In your opinion, please tell how it's possible to ensure without coming across the principles of the Charter. Answer. I think these both questions are related. European Bauhaus is a wonderful slogan. I've heard von Leyen's address. I think that was a very good address. And defining this direction as Bauhaus or calling it by any other name, already these principles are being followed. And now they are made into one single cake. So as to Jūrmala, I think the reason is that those summer houses, these areas of summer house buildings, questions about accessibility, I think it's not very topical really, because no one needs to have access in other to buildings of other people. But what we need to be thinking about finding solutions is this Green Deal or energy efficiency, in order we do not waste energy, especially fossil energy, and create smoke, but at the same time we can live there and cut down CO2 emissions.
And definitely, colleague Sandra has already mentioned in her presentation that our very nif houses, like from the fairy tale about 3 piglets, one built of straw, one built of some wood, and only one built by plaster. Very often these summer houses without such a very deep foundation, very, very soft foundation, sometimes contradicts the Venice Charter to some extent. In some cases, when that simple fix is chosen, exterior of buildings should be preserved and maintained. We are lucky that that Jūrmala city municipality established our cultural heritage and design center with the purpose and aim to ensure preservation of cultural heritage. And all these Bauhaus and other quality parameters and criteria to be met according to various international documents. In Jūrmala City Municipality and Board, I am working already for 19 years, but such friendly push will allow us to have quite a lot of work, heaps of work, but at the same time we will be providing beautiful city landscape, city urban construction with gradual, slow, thorough reconstruction and restoration. Because I might say that 99% of the audience or of the people involved as stakeholders or as decision makers haven't read of the Venice Charter, but we are also doing some awareness-raising campaigns and trainings, educating the audience, for instance, also school children, etc., and are also prioritizing the purposes of and intended use of restored buildings. I have a question to you. In the presentation, we saw the former construction board building, which has deteriorated and destructed. So a private owner, he will have a replica. I guess that is a replica the best option in that case. Yes, what we are calling a naming replica, as it is closer to a copy. So a replica has quite a negative connotation, at least in Latvia. But the building has been surveyed and has been measured. There is a lot of details to be measured and identified. Yes, we hope very well and hope very much that all those details, characteristic details of Jūrmala architecture and elements should be preserved. So we have actually a lot of buildings which have been preserved quite okay, but this is remains which a private owner decided to replicate. So, for instance, there are some buildings or an architect, Kronbergs, with his family house. There are buildings which are not preserved, as in this case, which are not included on some lists of summer houses, traditional summer houses in Asari, is turned into high-quality living building. May I comment? That is a monument in that case. So it is still on the list of monuments, and Gundars could tell about this particular building if you wish to hear more details about that. The question, which is also administrative and legal, that is architectural monument we may not disassembly. That was the answer, the reply by the Ministry of Culture. Even if it remains on ruins, they are still an architectural monument and cultural monument, which is beautiful and should stay as it is. Answering to other question, what would be better, a copy or replica? Several years ago, then I just started my work in Jūrmala Board Center, Design Center and Cultural Heritage Center. I might say that yes, perhaps a newly erected modern house would be better instead of ruins or remains, but at the same time now, at this moment, current moment, I might oppose. There should be a proportion between authentic historical buildings and newly erected modern buildings exist, and that proportion varies in the course of time. And I wouldn't believe 3 years ago. It is usually quite an emotional discussion whether we should have reconstructions, whether we would need copies or replicas in positive connotation. but we conclude that we must preserve sense and vibe of Jūrmala in Jūrmala, and I actually would classify it as a chapter or domain of intangible heritage in Jūrmala, that historical memory, collective memory about Jūrmala, about particular place. This copy is capable of offering and providing this intangible heritage of collective memory. We have 1,500 of buildings which should be deconstructed, which should be disassembled due to their technical condition, even if they are considered and classified as architectural monuments. But some of them, some dozens of them are restored and also retrofitted inside, in interior, not in exterior, and that is the most important for our Jūrmala Construction Board and Cultural Heritage and Design Center. This part of our aspect of intangible heritage is very crucial, and Petris has to say a lot about it. I would like to reflect a very well-known situation to almost all the present people here today. One building, what Mr. Posten is mentioned at Dzirnavu Street, mentioned by the presentation, where one building was disassembled, instead of which a different building was built, which was only some people considered and perceived as something totally different in that block. But I guess that the difference will disappear in some years' time. But instead, it might be, or it could have been, a newly erected multi-apartment modern building or office building, which would be total failure. And my perspective is from the point of view of street spaces of Riga streets and quality of those streets, that was safer solution as it was done in that case. Another case is Trokšņu Street in Riga towards the Parliament building of Latvia and to the opposite direction. So both neighboring houses of the Architects Union, which in pre-war Latvia or during interwar period in Latvia, they were quite very low reputation blocks and districts located Swedish Gate, also the oldest parts and some parts and remains and copies of Riga Wall or Riga Fortification Wall with Swedish gates and those buildings constituting the Swedish gates, and also a line of houses parallel to fortification wall. So, and in the past we managed to stop those projects, which were very failing and unsuccessful proposals that such modern buildings should not be built in Old Riga town. And they have chosen some 5 to 6 buildings according to genetic similarity of historical substance after research and surveys done by the scientists. Has anyone actually noticed that these are newly erected buildings? And if we are discussing the Venice Charter, and charter in English is something solid and something hard. So we must understand, first of all, what we need in one specific place and size not to spoil our environment. And if we are capable and able of using the Venice Charter as a good doctor prescribes some medicine to treat. So you designed also buildings on Trokšņa Street and a building published in Future of Riga Past. So there was a ditch many centuries ago that it should be not down, but it should be covered, and some buildings should be restored, as in pre-war Latvia. That was a very old story. There was around a circle of some asymmetric houses located there, and Antmanis had, if you will build them, I will burn them down myself. So I was warned, but the essence of the dispute was that emptiness and inability to use that space of urban environment. There is a drought all the time and constantly, so I had an idea to add something which had existed there some centuries ago, so that some life would happen there, so that they would be inhabited and maintained and preserved. So that it would be connected also to this fortification wall and this parallel line of houses. But the main thing is not to use the Venice Charter maliciously, of doing harm to ourselves, not to make our life, professional life, unclear and very tiny. I know these two ladies for 27 years, and I have a public discovery to be made here, announcement that I love all the time, and we have constant discussions, very creative ideas and results of those discussions. And Jan had to add something about that. Yes, I wished to comment the previously mentioned terms. From the perspective of Kuldīga, tangible monument. If we say ruins, then it's something or deteriorated buildings which have deteriorated so much that they could not be restored, for instance. But in Kuldīga we have very clear terminology. For instance, if a house or building is considered and classified as deteriorating building, then we have specific parameters, criteria, and to-do list. We have also a clear distinction what is a copy. As a copy, yes, perhaps, when traditional construction is followed, it is a copy. But the practice itself, intangible heritage and knowledge which we should continue and transfer to the next generation, aura or vibe or atmosphere is a very specific phenomenon which can be spoiled by following the principle of contrast or by fast, short-term solution instead of a long-term, thorough, full and thoughtful solution, especially in urban environment. So it's very hard to put into words and some characterizing parameters what an atmosphere might mean, and newly erected buildings, sustainability and life cycle if compared to historical buildings. How much resources are needed to build, to assembly and to maintain such a newly erected building, and whether that traditional continuity is followed in those newly erected buildings as well. And by combining the statements and the reflections of Mr. Pēteris, I had a question to Jana. So, a year has passed after the moment in Riyadh when we were present at the announcement or declaring ceremonies that Kuldīga has turned and has been included in the list of UNESCO cultural and architectural heritage at 46 degrees Celsius in this very hot country. But who are the major experts of restoration? So we must also interpret that a very specific and legal context and text wording of the Venice Charter and other documents into the language which would be very easily acceptable by this cultural heritage community. So that to put that into simple words in like popular language so that people could understand it.
And if we involve people, young people, elderly, then of course they are proud. They perceive them as part of the specific objects. For example, excursions to seniors is one thing we do. We want to show these values promoted by UNESCO, and this is something that we do to involve people. And when people ask, how are we doing in this year under the UNESCO, then I think it would be not a good news if we say that something has changed. If we need something that's went through many years and different approaches, different materials, then at this time nothing really should change. Of course, if a financial situation is developing, changing, then this is additional value. But how Kuldīga would look like in 50 years, I would say nothing much needs to change. Robert, a question to you. Peteris, in his address, reminded us what's written in the Venice Charter. One of the main ideas there is to protect aesthetic and historic value of monuments. And what is value, what priorities are, architecture or historical aspect, or perhaps immaterial in the material heritage. How to find the balance between these two, material and immaterial heritage. How to bring the soul to the building. Do you think the Venice Charter is taking into account this intangible heritage? I think I can move from cities and towns to countryside. We are often faced with such challenges. There is an object which is restored, and when we think how to live and put life into this building or to keep what is already there. And yes, and this is the right time to remind that at the base of everything is person for which we build this buildings. So when we make architecture for these buildings, we always should keep these people in mind, people who are going to use the buildings, so that the building does not become unpractical for use. It's very good that architects do a good job. It's perfect. But what's really important is that the use by residents, by peoples, should not be affected in a negative way. What we should strive that the historic substance is preserved, but at the same time also these functions that are going to be there, that is in sync, in tune with what people are going to do there in these buildings. And sometimes, for example, castles or manors, there are these houses are being rebuilt, and we are saying, okay, you are making a museum out of these buildings. And this is one of the functions that buildings can really do, but there are also some other use of, for example, craftsman center or co-creation space or something else. There are also some other solutions that can be used in these renovated buildings. So it's not that in the old houses, so old things should be, and this is what we should think, how to bring life to these buildings. And the humans who lived there before, the humans who still live there, we cannot do that in an artificial way. We are not going to ship people to restore the building. And I think also historical schools, and now we have less and less children in countryside, and many of the schools are being closed. And the good news is that simply there are some activists, some elderly, for example, teachers, and these buildings are still, they have some life in it, and because of the enthusiasm of these peoples, tourists are being invited in these buildings are being shown to people, and I think this is very good. And the Venice Charter also shows the way to us and it's already was mentioned, the stratification. The stratifications, for example, from Soviet times, cannot be the worst, the ones that should be immediately removed. There are different examples in Latvia that has become sometimes like kitsch, that we know that lots of money is needed to renovate buildings, and sometimes this Soviet time stratification, like in Venēcijas, there is a castle, there's a glass disco built, and tourists really like it, at least for time being. Some of the architects said that it should be demolished and we should go back to 19th century. But I think, wait a minute, I think this would be a waste of resources. We should keep perhaps completely idiotic, but at the same time fascinating solution. I think there are 3 towers there, and that is something to learn. Also, workmanship cabinet in the Pope Manor. Yes, that's another example that the school in Pope is active. There are 3 unique areas with wooden paneling, and indeed there is a workmanship class for boys, and it's very successful. And construction board made several remarks. Some of them were removed, according to Peter Bloom's comment. But in 50 years, it still was good. It's intangible heritage. My first father learned to make woodwork in there. Now, as to the thank you. And now, as to the perfect restoration, Article 9 of Charter. There are many discussions about the authors themselves discussed should it be rewritten, and it's about restoration formula, how it's being put. There's that there is also risk of a simplified perception of the Venice Charter, and also scientific aspect. Nevertheless, at the same time, some people believe that restoration is an art form. It needs creativity. So here I wanted to start with Inara, and then the rest of you, please tell, restoration is art or science? Answer: restoration is science. Definitely, it's science, and sometimes there are some elements of arts. Why sometimes? I think there are many people who believe there is a dry science. There are many schools of restoration, and my colleagues here already put it forward that we are restoring specific cultural heritage monument. for a group of society. And let's not forget that there is local society, heritage society, call it that you wish. And here's an example I really like to, namely Sarkaņu church and painting restoration there. With scientific approach, restoration was started. The painting was put back, and local community did not recognize painting. Jesus' face was changed, and it turned out that Jesus' face was not painted in a best manner. And it really took time that when the local community accepted these changes, embittered face of Jesus. And so sometimes this is, we even with scientific approach, we should always think, should we do things because we want to do? It's concept of architecture, scientific approach, and it's restorators need to follow historic original, forgetting about tradition, about cultural memory present. If, for example, I should say about Riga Castle Capella, 16th century paintings, how I remember it, for me personally, and it was said that it's unfinished, and if some of us, all of us are restoring it, perhaps changing it. It's not my anymore. It's not my memory. It's not the memory I have. It's not something what Mother Rasiņa saw at the time, but it's going to be something for people who visit, for visitors of National Museum, of Riga Museum, and we are going to shape their perception. It's not a question that has a single answer. It's not so simple. The Castle of Rundāle is another wonderful example of restoration. Yes, I absolutely. I wanted to ask this question to Pēteris, but Pēteris has something to add. Please, Pēteris. Well, restorator should be an artist, of course. But the process is creative, and I would not want to work as a restorator who is only following technical approaches and works according to some algorithm. I can say that, for example, House of Mentzendorf, I think you visited all of it. In second floor, there's a hall, and 40% is original. The rest is add-ons in order to gain overall perception of the whole, to create interior. It's a museum of interior. And if we speak of paintings or sculpture, there's one set of floors. And if we speak of interior, then we can speak also of Rundāle. They followed similar approach. This large work of art is the Castle of Rundāle. It's a Rose Hall or something else. It's art with limited possibilities. Wonderful definition. Thank you. And science or art, it should have soul, feelings, and feelings that make me to think of artificial intelligence, modern technologies. Mr. Lēnieks, how do you think artificial intelligence can help us in the future to live in 60 years old history? I don't use artificial intelligence, and I think some examples are rather weird. Until it's so weird, I think it should be forbidden to enter our practice. And when there are, it creates some solutions which are acceptable to us. They are experimenting so far. Those experiments should tell us what should not be built. Would you not be afraid of artificial intelligence when it can create something that's blend in from what humans create? That in the end you would not be able to tell if that's your child or that's child of artificial intelligence. Answer: I see the solar panels are being used in order to save climate and to use resources. I think in Kuldīga you can also put it in a backyard. Is it so? Yeah, outside the old town. More outside the old town. And for example, in Portugal, you should not really apply it to the property itself. But if necessary, you put it somewhere outside and have a connection with a property.
So artificial intelligence actually is a tool where the mankind will decide where it can be used and where it may not be used. I have great expectations for artificial intelligence to some elementarium or toolbox for choosing the best restoration method, perhaps. But still, that is machine learning opportunity. Is it he or she or it? So artificial intelligence should be populated with databases and with all the knowledge of humankind before. So we have a very practical question and inspiration for ICOMOS Latvia National Committee, which is translation of the Venice Charter, where we have got that. And as the first speaker, Benedict Selfslag, was asking, we are not sure, so we have to study from which original language did we translate the Venice Charter into Latvian. Was it original French wording, or it was already derivative or derived English translation? And the question is whether we should have to compare English and French original, speaking over and discussing every word in the wording of original Venice Charter to improve or to provide much better translation into Latvian, as our scientists have done with at the Faculty of Philology by translating the Bible, New Testament, from earlier origins and earlier wordings from ancient Greek instead of Latin. So in YouTube, sorry, not on YouTube, but on browser, searched for translation. So German was another original translation provided in 60s and early 70s, so we can compare several official language wordings. We have heard also comments on those translators, authors of the Venice Charter itself. So perhaps it is useful to comment, to have some explanation, like we have comments to the Constitution of Latvia or some other international treaties, with some comments and explanations provided. So, for instance, professional would have no understanding, no problem to understand some nuances, but as a common person would read the Venice Charter for the first time in their lives, it would be very hard. Perhaps you can also get lost in those legal terms, etc. But as Baiba mentioned, and as Peteris has mentioned before in his presentation, we should have quite a lot of discussions which would result in fruitful conclusions and outcomes. We can add to the comments, but it would really nice for us to find a term in Latvian which would correspond to those terms, for instance, in original French or English or German, etc. Thank you very much for your very wonderful panel discussion, for your presence today, also informal chat and talk during lunch and coffee breaks. And I would like to conclude with a quote from Lemire. In 1976, when I was born, he wrote, "It would be too easy to think that a simple compliance with several regulations would allow us to completely solve such a fine synergy of details, of nuances, and the condition of a spirit is crucial." Characterized by two properties, which is respect to old work and shyness to intervene in the process. And I would also mention humbleness, context, and the person, the end user we are doing and restoring